In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it.
Welcome to Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man. I'm Stephen Leake, a podcast where contemplation drifts like smoke, slow, deliberate, and unyielding in its trajectory. I'm your host, the Cigarette Smoking Man, inviting you into an intimate space where we dismantle, examine, and reframe our most deeply held beliefs and societal constructs. Today's episode embarks on a journey into an idea of both ancient and ever new marriage. Yet we will not approach it through the familiar lens of white picket fences, flowers, or scripted vows. Instead, we propose to peel back the layers of tradition and expectation to reveal marriage as a radically subversive act. What if marriage could be understood not just as a personal or cultural ritual, but as a deliberate, revolutionary commitment that challenges the very foundations of the society we inhabit? This might sound provocative, perhaps even unsettling to some. For centuries, marriage has been wrapped in the garb of institutionality, entwined with religious, legal, and economic power structures that have often sought to define and confine it. But beneath the surface lies a potential for defiance and transformation. The act of two individuals intertwining their lives in conscious solidarity can become a potent resistance to the isolating, commodifying forces of modern existence. In this episode, we will dissect the notion of marriage as a form of revolutionary agency, a personal and political stand that disrupts societal norms and fosters transformation on multiple planes. We will reflect on how the revolutionary spirit in marriage emerges not from grand gestures or public declarations, but from everyday acts of commitment, the renegotiation of roles, and the pursuit of mutual freedom within intimacy. Our exploration will traverse the political terrain where marriage intersects with rights, freedoms, and cultural expectations. We will consider marriage's role in shaping individual identity and how it can serve as a site of resistance against oppressive frameworks, whether patriarchy, heteronormativity, or consumerist culture. We'll also delve into the personal realm, reflecting on the emotional and ethical decisions that sustain such a revolutionary commitment in the face of societal pressures to conform or capitulate. This conversation is meant for those who dare to think critically about love and loyalty, about the social contracts we accept and those we challenge. Whether you are partnered or not, whether you see marriage as sacred or obsolete, I invite you to accompany me in this candid dialogue that peels back convention to reveal the radical undercurrents beneath. As always, Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man is a space for reflection, a slow burning flame amid the fast flicker of daily noise. Here, we honor the power of thought, the necessity of questioning, and the courage it takes to stand firm in one's convictions, even when they unsettle the comfortable. So light your cigarette, or simply settle in. Prepare your mind for a journey where we reclaim marriage as an act of rebellion, hope, and profound human connection. Historical context: marriage as a political institution. We begin our musing by suggesting marriage, in its potential, can be a revolutionary act. To truly grasp the weight of that claim, we must first confront the heavy mantle of its history. For centuries, millennia even, marriage has been anything but a simple matter of personal affection or romantic union. It has been a cornerstone of social order, a linchpin of power, and a tool of governance. Far from being a private affair, marriage has historically been profoundly, unapologetically political. Think of it not as a contract of the heart, but often, quite literally, a contract of state, of family, of property. It was a mechanism through which power was consolidated, alliances were forged, wealth was transferred, and social hierarchies were maintained. The historical record is replete with examples demonstrating that the institution of marriage was designed, consciously or unconsciously, to serve the interests of those who held power, predominantly men and ruling classes. Alliances and diplomacy through matrimony. Perhaps the most visible historical function of marriage was its use in securing political alliances, from ancient dynasties to medieval monarchies and beyond. Marriages between ruling families were not matters of love, but of strategic necessity. A royal marriage could end wars, solidify treaties, merge territories, and establish dynasties. These unions were statecraft enacted through human bonds, the bodies of princes and princesses serving as geopolitical chess pieces. Consider the Habsburgs, whose vast European empire was built as much on carefully orchestrated marriages as on military conquest. Their famous motto, "Let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry," speaks volumes about the power of marital politics. Even below the level of royalty, among noble families and tribal leaders, marriage served similar purposes. It was a way to cement loyalty, ensure mutual defense, and expand influence without resorting to conflict. The exchange of vows was often secondary to the exchange of land, titles, and promises of military aid. These marriages were less about creating new families and more about merging existing power structures. Marriage as a pillar of patriarchy. Historically, marriage has been perhaps the most fundamental institution for enforcing patriarchal structures. But that's debatable, whether it's purely patriarchal. It established clear lines of authority within the household, placing the husband in a position of legal and economic dominance over his wife and children. Under systems like coverture and English common law, a married woman's legal identity was subsumed by her husband's. She could not own property independently, enter into contracts, or even represent herself in court without her husband's consent. Her body, her labor, and her reproductive capacity became, in essence, his possession. This control over women through marriage was crucial for several reasons. It ensured the legitimacy of heirs, vital for the orderly transfer of property and titles. It regulated female sexuality, channeling it into socially sanctioned reproductive roles within the male headed household. And it controlled female labor, confining women largely to the domestic sphere, managing the household and bearing children, thereby freeing men to engage in public life, commerce, and politics. The expectation of wifely obedience was not merely a cultural norm, it was often legally enforced. Domestic violence was frequently overlooked or considered a husband's right, and marital rape was not recognized as a crime in many legal systems until astonishingly recently. The historical marriage contract, therefore, was often less a partnership and more an agreement under which a woman transferred control of herself and her future progeny from her father to her husband. Property, inheritance, and economic control. The economic dimensions of historical marriage are impossible to overstate. Marriage was the primary vehicle for the transfer and consolidation of property and wealth across generations. Land, livestock, money, and goods were exchanged through dowries, given by the bride's family to the groom or the couple, and bride prices given by the groom or his family to the bride's family. These transactions solidified economic ties between families and determined the material basis of the new household. Furthermore, marriage ensured ensured that property remained within specific lineages, typically the male line. Rules of inheritance heavily favored sons, and a woman's property, once married, often became her husband's to manage, control, and inherit. This economic function meant that decisions about who married whom were often driven by financial calculations rather than personal feelings. The marital market was a literal market where individuals, particularly women, were valuable assets to be traded in exchange for economic advantage, social standing, or political gain. In societies where land was the primary source of wealth and power, control over who inherited that land was paramount. Marriage customs, including arranged marriages, restrictions on divorce, and rules governing legitimacy, were all designed to maintain the integrity of family estates and prevent their fragmentation or transfer to undesirable parties. Enforcing social norms and maintaining order. Beyond the upper echelons, marriage also functioned as a critical tool for social control and the enforcement of community norms. It was the expected trajectory for adults, a rite of passage that signaled conformity and respectability. Unmarried adults, particularly women, were often viewed with suspicion or marginalized within the community. Marriage provided a framework for social reproduction, dictating acceptable relationships, sexual behavior, and family structures. It reinforced class boundaries and racial hierarchies. Marriage laws often prohibited unions between individuals of different social strata or racial backgrounds, serving to maintain the purity and dominance of privileged groups. These laws were explicit tools of social engineering, designed to prevent the blurring of lines that sustained unequal power structures. In many historical contexts, marriage was not just encouraged, it was practically mandatory for full social inclusion, reinforcing the idea that the nuclear married family unit was the only legitimate and desirable way to live. Marriage customs and laws also reflected and reinforced religious doctrines and moral codes. The state, often intertwined with religious authority, used marriage regulations to promote specific religious beliefs about sexuality, fidelity, and family roles. Heresy or deviation from prescribed marital norms could result in severe social or legal penalties. The public nature of historical marriage ceremonies and the involvement of community or religious leaders underscored its function as a social compact, not merely a personal vow. Governance and state interest in marriage. States have historically had a vested interest in regulating marriage because stable families were seen as the bedrock of a stable society. Marriage laws determined who could marry and at what age, with whose consent, and under what conditions. They regulated divorce, inheritance, and the status of children. These laws weren't just abstract legal principles, they were actively used to shape populations, manage resources, and maintain internal order. In some periods, states even used incentives or penalties to encourage marriage and procreation, particularly after wars or during times of perceived population decline. Conversely, they could restrict marriage for certain groups, i.e., slaves, specific ethnic minorities, individuals with disabilities, to control their growth or integration into the dominant society. The state's regulation of marriage was a direct assertion of its authority over the most intimate aspects of its citizens' lives, demonstrating that even personal relationships were subject to political control. Consider the historical criminalization of bigamy, adultery, or fornication. These weren't just moral prohibitions, they were legal strictures designed to protect the institution of marriage as defined by the state and church, ensuring the clarity of lineage and the control of sexual behavior within sanctioned boundaries. The state's power was literally enacted through the policing of marital fidelity and family formation. Even the very concept of who counted as a legitimate spouse has been a matter of political definition throughout history. The struggles for recognition of interfaith marriages, interracial marriages, and most recently same sex marriages highlight that the boundaries of the institution are constantly negotiated within the political arena. The state's power to define marriage is in itself a profound political tool. Critical commentary beyond the romantic veil. This historical perspective compels us to look beyond the modern Western ideal of marriage as purely a romantic union based on mutual affection. While that ideal exists today, it is a relatively recent phenomenon, and its dominance often obscures the institution's long, complex, and often oppressive past. Framing historical marriage simply as a collection of personal choices would be a gross misreading of the evidence. Instead, we see an institution deeply embedded in the power structures of its time, an instrument wielded by patriarchs, monarchs, landowners, and states to maintain control over people, particularly women, and resources. It was a system designed for continuity, order, and the preservation of the status quo, serving economic, political, and social masters before it served individual happiness and fulfillment. Understanding this history is crucial. It reveals that marriage is not an immutable natural state, but a social construct that has been shaped and reshaped by political forces. Although I do think there's some biological evidence for it as a biological creation as well, inherent to mammals. But that's a story for another context. It highlights the radical departure represented by modern notions of marriage based on equality, mutual respect, and personal choice, and it provides the necessary context for our central thesis. Given this history of control and conformity, the act of consciously choosing to enter and define a marriage on one's own terms, challenging inherited norms and power dynamics within that union, can indeed be seen as a profoundly revolutionary act. It is an act that must contend with the residual echoes of this political past, the ingrained expectations of power, submission, and economic dependency that still cling to the institution, to forge a partnership of equals, to prioritize mutual growth and freedom over traditional roles and economic control, to build a life together that stands in quiet defiance of the isolating forces of modern society. That is where the revolutionary potential lies. The weight of history shows us what marriage has been used for. Now we turn to what it might become. Marriage as resistance, challenging patriarchy and norms. Having laid bare the historical reality of marriage as a political instrument, often wielded to enforce power structures, particularly patriarchy, we can now pivot to the central idea. How can this same institution, or the act of forming committed unions, become a site of resistance? If history shows us marriage as a tool of control, how might it be repurposed, redefined, or even subverted to challenge those very systems? The conventional patriarchal model of marriage casts a long shadow. It dictates rigid gender roles, often assigns unequal power dynamics, and prioritizes the needs and authority of the male head of household. It can constrain individual freedom, especially for women, and reinforce societal expectations about domesticity, labor, and sexuality. To declare marriage in this context as revolutionary seems counterintuitive, perhaps even absurd. Yet the revolutionary potential emerges not from adhering to the traditional mold, but from consciously and often painstakingly breaking it from within, or challenging its exclusive definition from without. Resisting patriarchy within the union. For individuals entering or existing within traditionally structured marriages, the act of resistance begins with the conscious dismantling of ingrained norms within the relationship itself. This is not a passive act. It requires constant negotiation, reflection, and a commitment to equality that flies in the face of centuries of societal conditioning. What does this resistance look like on a micro level? Challenging traditional roles, refusing to adhere to rigid gendered divisions of labor, whether in household chores, childcare, or financial provision. This involves deliberately sharing responsibilities based on skill, preference, or necessity, rather than outdated notions of what a husband or wife should do. It's a quiet rebellion against the idea that domestic work is inherently female or that financial provision is solely male. I've been in several relationships where I was the stay-at-home um, domestic person, and my girlfriend was the breadwinner for that relationship. Especially with me being on disability, there's that's what worked for us at the time. Equal decision making, ensuring that major life decisions about careers, finances, where to live, how to raise children are made jointly, with equal weight given to each partner's voice and needs. This is a direct challenge to the historical model where the husband held ultimate authority. Financial autonomy and transparency, rejecting models of financial control where one partner, historically the husband, managed all assets. Instead, couples can practice financial transparency, shared accounts, or independent management with mutual agreement, ensuring both partners have agency and security. Prioritizing mutual growth and autonomy, supporting each other's individual pursuits, careers, friendships, and personal growth, even when they diverge. This resists the historical expectation that one partner's identity becomes subsumed by the marriage or their partner's life. Defining intimacy and sexuality on your own terms, rejecting patriarchal or societal expectations around sex within marriage, including the idea of conjugal rights or prescribed roles, instead building a sexual and intimate life based on mutual consent, desire, and respect. Navigating power dynamics consciously, recognizing that power imbalances can arise from factors like income, career status, or social and societal privilege, and actively working to mitigate them and ensure fairness and respect within the relationship. These internal acts might seem small in isolation, but when undertaken collectively by couples in the aggregate, they represent a significant erosion of the foundation upon which the traditional institution was built. Each renegotiated chore list, each shared financial decision, each affirmation of individual autonomy within the union is a quiet act of defiance against historical oppression. It is a revolutionary potential of building a partnership based on equity and mutual respect in a world still grappling with the legacies of inequality. Marriage is a site of broader social and political resistance. Beyond the interpersonal dynamics, marriage and the struggle for its recognition have served as powerful catalysts for broader social and political change. The very act of certain groups seeking entry into or redefining the institution has historically been a direct challenge to the established order. Interracial marriage as resistance. One potent historical example is the struggle for the right to interracial marriage. Anti-miscegenation laws existed in many parts of the world, particularly in the United States, until the landmark Supreme Court case Loving v. Virginia in 1967. These laws were explicit tools of white supremacy, apparently designed to prevent racial mixing and maintain a racial hierarchy. For individuals of different races, to marry was not just a personal choice, it was a criminal act, a defiance of state power and deeply ingrained racial prejudice. For me, this is coming from a place of personal freedom and not parroting shit about white supremacy, which I'm kind of suspect of. The Lovings, Mildred and Richard, who fought for their right to live together as a legally married couple in Virginia, embodied this resistance. Their desire for a legally recognized union directly challenged a cornerstone of policy and ultimately led to a ruling that dismantled such laws nationwide. Their marriage was, in effect, a revolutionary blow against systemic racism perpetuated through control over intimate relationships. Feminist critiques and challenges. Feminist movements have long scrutinized and challenged the traditional institution of marriage, often seen as a primary site of women's oppression. Early feminists highlighted issues like coverture, where a woman's legal identity was absorbed by her husband, lack of property rights, and the expectation of domestic servitude. Their critiques and activism paved the way for legal reforms that granted married women more autonomy, such as the Married Women's Property Acts in the 19th century. Later feminist waves questioned the very structure of marriage, advocating for easier divorce, reproductive rights within marriage, and challenging the sexual double standard. For feminists to marry or to choose not to marry, while explicitly rejecting or renegotiating traditional roles, was and remains an act of resistance against expectations. Again, for me, in my point of view, this is coming from a place of personal freedom. I think the individual should have the option and the right to be with whoever they want. Not so much as like a social justice thing. But I will work with anybody who is fighting for individual freedom and more rights and privileges. The institution of marriage is sacred, and we should be fought for. And gender roles, as I see them, can rob people of learning necessary skills, especially as a most often single guy. I have had to cook for myself and clean for myself and take care of myself, which is a necessary life skill that it would benefit everyone from learning, and especially guys of the boomer generation who have been more dependent on women as to serve domestic roles. Like my dad, he has a hard time when he's on by himself, taking care of himself without my mother. That's the way that the boomer guys were just existed in the world. And it started with like my generation. I went maybe Gen X, a little bit before my time, of being more self-reliant as guys. The Revolutionary Act of Marriage Equality. Perhaps the most prominent contemporary example of marriage as a revolutionary act is the global movement for marriage equality for same sex couples. For centuries, marriage was legally and socially defined as exclusively as a union between a man and a woman. This definition was deeply intertwined with religious doctrines, patriarchal control, and the enforcement of heteronormativity, the assumption that heterosexuality is the default or normal sexual orientation and that sexual marital relations are only legitimate within this framework. Now, heterosexuality does serve the perpetuation of the species, and I come from a biological understanding of mammal behavior when it comes to sex. So, when I talk about social constructs, I'm not 100% comfortable ascribing everything to social construct, to it being just a social construct. I'm using this language because it speaks to libertarianism and personal freedom. The demand for marriage equality was far more than a simple request for legal recognition. It was a fundamental challenge to the state's power to define legitimate relationships and families based on sexual orientation. It asserted the dignity and equality of LGBTQ individuals and their relationships, directly confronting deeply entrenched prejudice and discrimination. The fight involved decades of activism, legal battles, and cultural shifts, culminating in the landmark decisions like Obergefell v. Hodges in the United States in 2015, which legalized same-sex marriages nationwide. For a same-sex couple to stand before family, friends, and the state and exchange vows, declaring their love and commitment is a profoundly revolutionary act. It reclaims an institution that historically excluded and marginalized them, asserting their right to participate fully in a fundamental social structure. It forces society to confront its biases and expand its definition of family and legitimate partnership. Each same-sex marriage ceremony is a quiet victory, a public declaration of existence and validity in the face of historical denial and oppression. I think it's every person's right to marry who they love. It's an individual right, a fundamental human right. I do not have that as somebody on disability. I cannot legally get married without losing my benefits and theoretically fucking dying on the street without resources. So the fight is not over. Okay? The ongoing revolution. The revolutionary potential of marriage and committed unions is not confined to grand historical struggles or legal battles. It continues in the everyday lives of countless individuals and couples who choose to live their relationships authentically, challenging ingrained norms and building partnerships based on equality, respect, and individual freedom. It is present in the couple who rejects the idea that one partner must change their name upon marriage, asserting independent identity. It's in the partners who decide to raise children together. Marriage, with its heavily historical baggage, remains a complex and often contradictory institution. Yet the very act of two individuals choosing to intertwine their lives in a conscious, deliberate partnership carries an inherent revolutionary charge. It is an assertion of agency, a declaration of love and solidarity in a world that often seeks to divide and control, and a quiet, persistent reimagining of what intimate connection can be when built on foundations of equality and mutual liberation. The revolution is not in the certificate, but in the commitment to build a world, starting with one's most intimate relationship, where norms and oppressive structures lose their hold. Marriage and personal revolution, transformation within the union. We have navigated the complex and often stark history of marriage, revealing its deep entanglement with political power and social control. We have also explored how, in recent times, and through various struggles, committed unions have become potent sites of resistance, challenging norms, racial hierarchies, and heteronormativity. The battle for recognition and equality in marriage has been and continues to be a profoundly public and political act. The revolution inherent in marriage doesn't solely reside in the external societal challenges it poses. It is perhaps most potent, most demanding, and most transformative when it turns inward. The commitment between two individuals, when approached with intention and courage, becomes a crucible for personal revolution, a space where the individual self is challenged, reshaped, and often reborn through the shared experience of building a life together. In a world that increasingly values fleeting connection, superficiality, and radical self sufficiency, the deliberate act of binding one's life to another in mutual vulnerability is a quiet, persistent defiance. This section delves into the psychological and emotional terrain of marriage, exploring how the intimate space of a committed partnership can foster profound personal transformation. It is within this shared space, built on trust, compromise, and enduring commitment, that individuals can confront their limitations, expand their capacities, and resist the pervasive forces of isolation and alienation that mark modern existence. The partnership as a crucible for growth. Entering into a committed partnership, particularly marriage, is an implicit agreement to embark on a journey of mutual shaping. It requires a willingness to move beyond the confines of the individual self and engage deeply with another consciousness. This engagement is not merely about coexistence, it is an active process of negotiation, adaptation, and growth that can fundamentally alter one's perspective, habits, and emotional landscape. At the heart of this personal revolution within marriage lies vulnerability. To truly build a life with another person requires dropping defenses, revealing insecurities, and sharing one's most intimate fears and desires. This level of sustained vulnerability is a revolutionary act in a society that often equates openness with weakness. It demands a level of trust that is challenging to build and maintain, requiring both partners to offer not just honesty, but also compassion and acceptance in response to the other's revealed self. The willingness to truly be seen, flaws and all, and to offer the same non judgmental gaze in return fosters a psychological intimacy that few other relationships demand or can sustain. Furthermore, marriage challenges the very notion of individual identity. While popular culture often celebrates radical individualism and self actualization pursued in isolation, marriage necessitates the creation of a shared identity, a we that exists alongside and often influences the individual I. This isn't about losing oneself, but about expanding the boundaries of the self to include another. It requires a constant negotiation between individual needs and desires and the needs and desires of the partnership. This can be uncomfortable, even jarring, for those accustomed to prioritizing only their own trajectory. Learning to compromise, to sacrifice certain individual pursuits for the greater good of the union, or conversely, to assert one's needs while respecting those of the partner, is a process of significant personal refinement. It's a revolution against ego, against the ingrained habit of seeing the world solely through one's own lens. A partner in a committed relationship also serves as an unparalleled mirror. They witness your daily habits, your reactions under stress, your blind spots, and your hidden strengths. Their feedback, when offered and received with love and respect, can be a powerful catalyst for self awareness and change. This constant, intimate feedback loop pushes individuals to confront aspects of themselves they might otherwise ignore or deny. It can reveal patterns of behavior, emotional triggers, or communication styles that hinder connection and growth. The willingness to hear difficult truths from the person closest to you and to engage in the often painful work of changing is perhaps one of the most challenging yet rewarding aspects of the marital journey. This mutual mirroring and accountability represent a defiance of the easy path of remaining comfortably unaware or unchallenged. Finally, the inevitable conflicts and disagreements that arise in any long term partnership are not merely hurdles to overcome, they are essential engines of growth. Learning to navigate conflict constructively to fight fair, to listen actively even when angry, to seek understanding over victory, and to repair ruptures builds crucial emotional and communication skills. It forces individuals to develop patience, empathy, and resilience. These are not skills easily acquired in isolation. They are forged in the demanding, intimate space of shared life. The commitment to working through conflict rather than abandoning the partnership when things get difficult is in itself a revolutionary act of perseverance in a disposable culture. Mutual support in an alienated world. Modern society, with its emphasis on competition, transient relationships, and digital connection, often divorced from its physical presence, can be profoundly alienating. Individuals can feel adrift, unsupported, and isolated, even when surrounded by people. Against this backdrop, the mutual support offered within a committed partnership stands as a powerful act of resistance. Marriage, at its best, creates a private sanctuary, a refuge from the relentless pressures and indifference of the external world. This mutual support encompasses more than just practical assistance. It is fundamentally emotional. It is the knowledge that there is at least one other person in the world who is truly for you, who celebrates your triumphs as their own, and shares the burden of your failures and sorrows. Providing this unwavering emotional presence to a partner is an act of profound generosity and commitment. It requires cultivating deep empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. In marriage, empathy moves from a general human capacity to a daily practice, essential for navigating the shared emotional landscape of the union. Creating the shared emotional landscape is a revolutionary departure from the isolated emotional silos many people inhabit. It involves developing a unique language of understanding, shared inside jokes, mutual comforts, and agreed upon ways of processing feelings. This shared space allows for a depth of emotional expression and validation that is often absent in more superficial interactions. It provides a sense of belonging that counters the pervasive feeling of being disconnected or misunderstood. Offering and receiving this depth of emotional support builds a resilience in both partners that makes them stronger individuals and a stronger unit. The act of simply being present for a partner during difficult times, illness, job loss, grief, personal crisis, without judgment or expectation of immediate solutions, is a radical affirmation of their worth and dignity. It is a rejection of the transactional nature that can permeate many relationships in modern society, where value is often measured by utility or success. In a committed partnership, support is offered not because the other person is achieving or performing, but simply because they are your partner, integral to the shared life you are building. This unconditional support within the marital bond is a quiet yet powerful statement against the harsh individualism of the external world. The radical nature of enduring commitment. Perhaps one of the most inherently revolutionary aspects of marriage in the contemporary context is the commitment itself, the conscious decision to build a life together for the long haul. We live in an era characterized by fluidity, change, and a low tolerance for discomfort or difficulty. Relationships, jobs, and even identities can seem increasingly transient. Against this backdrop, the vow of enduring commitment, with all its implicit challenges and uncertainties, is a bold act of defiance. This commitment is not merely a static promise made at the outset. It is a dynamic, ongoing practice. It means choosing the partnership every day, even when it is hard, even when the external temptations or internal doubts arise. This requires significant discipline, patience, and a shared vision for the future. It is a resistance to the impulse to abandon or replace when things become challenging, an affirmation of the value of perseverance in shared history. Furthermore, the act of building something enduring together, a home, a family, shared experiences, accumulated memories, intertwined finances, mutual friends, creates a form of wealth and stability that transcends material possessions. This shared creation process fosters a deep sense of purpose and shared destiny. The collective act of creation, bringing into being a micro world shaped by shared values, compromises, and mutual love. This creation, this building of a stable, shared future, is revolutionary because it provides an anchor in a world often characterized by rootlessness and constant flux. It stands as a tangible manifestation of hope and continuity. Marriage as an antidote to isolation. Ultimately, the personal revolution fostered within marriage serves as a potent antidote to the widespread isolation and alienation of modern life. By demanding vulnerability, fostering mutual support, requiring enduring commitment, marriage creates a deep, stable connection that counters the forces pulling individuals apart. It builds a sense of belonging and interdependence that is increasingly rare. The partnership becomes a primary source of community, understanding, and validation. While external communities are vital, the constant, intimate presence of a partner provides a unique form of connection that sustains through life's inevitable challenges. It's a declaration that you are not alone in facing the world, that your joys and sorrows are shared, and that your existence is deeply intertwined with another. In conclusion, the revolutionary potential of marriage is not solely found in its capacity to challenge external power structures, though that capacity is significant and historically proven. It is also profoundly embedded in its ability to serve as a catalyst for internal transformation. By demanding vulnerability, fostering mutual support, requiring enduring commitment, and creating a bulwark against isolation, marriage pushes individuals towards growth, empathy, and resilience. It is a personal revolution enacted through the daily, often quiet, practice of building a life together, a defiant assertion of deep connection and shared humanity in a world that often feels fragmented and alone. Marriage in contemporary society, challenges and opportunities. We've traced the deep roots of marriage as a political institution, a force woven into the fabric of power, property, and social control throughout history. We've mused on how the very act of forming committed unions, particularly by marginalized groups or those challenging traditional norms, can be a powerful act of resistance. Now, let us turn our gaze to the present moment. What does marriage mean today? How do the rapid currents of contemporary life, technological upheaval, shifting social landscapes, economic pressures, and evolving personal values reshape this ancient institution? And within these challenges, where lie the opportunities for marriage to truly become a revolutionary act in the here and now? The landscape of committed partnership today is vastly different from that of even a few decades ago, let alone centuries past. The pressures and possibilities confronting couples are unique to our era. The traditional, often rigid framework of marriage is being stretched, questioned, and in many cases fundamentally altered by forces that are both external and deeply personal. Navigating these forces is where the contemporary revolutionary potential of marriage truly reveals itself. The impact of technology and connectivity. Consider first the ubiquitous presence of technology. The internet, social media, and instant communication have fundamentally altered how we meet, court, and relate. Online dating platforms have expanded potential partner pools beyond geographical limitations, democratizing access, but also presenting new challenges like the paradox of choice or the superficiality of profiles. Social media constantly exposes partners to curated versions of other people's relationships, fostering comparison, potential jealousy, and unrealistic expectations. The constant hum of notifications can erode presence and intimacy within the relationship, demanding attention that might otherwise be focused on the partner. Yet technology is a double-edged sword. It also offers unprecedented tools for connection, allowing couples to stay in touch across distances, share experiences in real time, and build shared digital lives for relationships that defy traditional geographic constraints. or require periods of separation due to work, family, etc., technology is not a barrier but a lifeline. Furthermore, online communities provide support networks for couples facing unique challenges or pursuing non traditional relationship models. The revolutionary act here isn't just using the technology, it's the conscious decision to manage its intrusion, prioritize present connection with one's partner, and leverage its tools to strengthen rather than dilute the intimate bond. Changing gender roles and expectations. Perhaps one of the most significant shifts impacting marriage is the dramatic evolution of gender roles. The historical model where man was the primary breadwinner and the woman the homemaker responsible for domestic labor and childcare is increasingly obsolete, though its residual influence remains potent. Women's increased participation in the workforce, their pursuit of higher education and independent careers, and growing expectations for men to be involved in domestic life and parenting have fundamentally altered the internal dynamics of marriage. This shift is both a challenge and an opportunity. It challenges traditional power structures and expectations, requiring couples to negotiate roles, responsibilities, and power dynamics, often without clear historical blueprints. Questions of who earns what, who does the child care, who manages household logistics, and whose career takes precedence are no longer dictated by gender, but must actively be decided upon. This can be a source of conflict and tension as partners grapple with ingrained biases and societal pressures. However, it is precisely in this negotiation that the revolutionary potential lies. Moving towards more egalitarian partnerships requires open communication, a willingness to challenge personal assumptions about gender, and a commitment to fairness and mutual support. Couples who consciously choose to build a partnership based on shared responsibilities, mutual respect for each other's contributions, whether paid labor or caregiving, and equal say in major decisions, are fundamentally redefining the marital contract. They are performing a quiet daily revolution against centuries of patriarchal structure, building unions based on true partnership rather than prescribed roles. This is a profound reimagining of what it means to be married, from a hierarchy to a team, from control to collaboration. Financial pressures and economic realities. Contemporary economic forces also exert immense pressure on modern marriages. Rising costs of living, student loan debt, precarious job markets, and economic inequality create financial stress that can strain even strong relationships. Decisions about careers, saving, spending, and family planning are often fraught with economic anxiety. The historical stability that marriage sometimes offered through the pooling of resources is challenged by economic precarity, where the loss of one income can be catastrophic. Furthermore, financial disparities within a couple, which may arise from differences in earning potential, career choices, or inherited wealth, can create complex power dynamics. Navigating these financial realities requires a level of transparency and a joint planning that was less common in the past. Couples must develop shared financial goals, communicate openly about anxieties and expectations, and decide how to manage money in a way that feels equitable and secure for both partners. The revolutionary response to the pressure lies in transforming financial management from a potential source of division into a practice of shared responsibility and mutual support, consciously creating financial transparency, developing joint strategies to tackle debt or build savings, and supporting a partner through periods of unemployment or underemployment are acts of solidarity. They counter the individualizing forces of the market economy and reinforce the idea that in marriage, partners face economic challenges together. This shared financial journey becomes a tangible manifestation of their commitment to a shared future, a collective resistance to the pressures of a consumerist, often unforgiving economic system. confluence of these contemporary forces, technological saturation, evolving gender dynamics, economic uncertainty, diversifying social values, creates a complex environment for marriage. The challenges are undeniable, requiring constant adaptation and negotiation. But within this complexity lies profound opportunity for revolutionary reimagining. When the external pressures chip away at the rigid, historical structure of marriage, they simultaneously reveal the potential for building something new, resilient in the space left behind. The absence of clear, universally accepted blueprints forces couples to become architects of their own unions. The contemporary revolutionary act of marriage is therefore not simply about challenging specific oppressive laws, though those struggles continue globally. It's about the conscious, daily work of creating a partnership. This is a revolution enacted not on the barricades, but in the quiet conversations across the kitchen table, in the shared spreadsheets, in the decisions about whose career requires flexibility, in the deliberate moments of putting down the phone and truly seeing one another. It is a continuous process of choosing your partner, choosing your shared life, and actively shaping it together in defiance of forces that would seek to isolate you, define you by outdated norms, or drown you in anxiety. In this light, marriage today is a radical proposition. It is a choice to build a fundamental unit of connection and mutual support in a world that often feels fragmented and indifferent. It's the courage to bind one's fate to another, to negotiate the complexities of modern life as a team, and to define intimacy and commitment on one's own terms. The challenges of contemporary society do not signal the death of marriage. They call for its revolution, a transformation from an institution of control into a dynamic, conscious partnership capable of fostering individual liberation and shared resilience. As we explore marriage as a revolutionary act, it's only fitting to pause and acknowledge the tools that help capture those radical thoughts and intimate reflections. Enter Moleskin notebooks, timeless companions for writers, artists, and thinkers who seek to preserve their musings in quality and style. For decades, Moleskin has been synonymous with exceptional craftsmanship and elegant design. Their notebooks are not just blank pages, they're invitations to create, question, and document the revolutionary ideas that shape our lives. Whether you're a poet sketching out verses, a philosopher tracing the contours of love and commitment, or someone who simply wants to capture the fleeting spark of inspiration, a moleskin is a trusted ally for your creative journey. In a world dominated by digital noise, there's something profoundly grounding about pen meeting paper, a tactile connection that invites deeper thought. Revolutionary ideas, like those discussed in Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man, deserve that reverence, that the chance to be nurtured and revisited. A moleskin notebook transforms your reflections, whether personal insights or transformative visions, into a lasting record, a private archive of your intellectual rebellion. Ready to start chronicling your own revolutionary musings? Visit moleskin.com or your nearest retailer to find the perfect notebook for your journey. Let Moleskin be the vessel for your thoughts, the quiet partner in your acts of creation, reflection, and resistance. Let's shift the tempo for a moment, talk about something essential to the rhythm of revolution itself. Brownie drums, crafted with meticulous care and a passion for uncompromising sound. Brownie drums stand as a beacon for musicians who refuse to settle for ordinary. This is not just percussion, it's an invitation to forge your own sonic path, to challenge musical norms, and to let your heartbeat shape the world. Since their inception, Brownie drums have been synonymous with craftsmanship that honors tradition while pushing boundaries. Hand-selected woods, precision tuning, and attention to acoustic excellence make every Brownie drum a unique instrument, responsive, powerful, and rich with character. When you're laying down deep grounding beats or intricate polyrhythms, the tactile connection to a Brownie drum fuels creative freedom. Ready to make your music resonate with courage and originality? Discover the full range of Brownie drums Unlock your revolutionary sound at browniedrums.com. Embrace the craft, feel the rhythm, and become the architect of your own musical revolution. As we delve into the revolutionary possibilities of marriage and personal transformation, it's fitting to turn our attention to a vital institution in the world of letters that champions voices of courage, conviction, and intellectual defiance. Monarch Literary Limited stands at the forefront of publishing literary fiction and poetry collections, distinguished not only by their high artistic merit, but also by their commitment to free speech and fearless truth telling. Monarch Literary is not merely a publishing house, it is a bastion for writers and poets who dare to speak truth to power. The company's mission transcends the conventional. It seeks to uplift works that challenge established narratives and question dominant paradigms. Monarch Literary Limited believes literature is a primary site of resistance, a crucial medium through which foundational principles can be affirmed and from which revolutionary ideas can emerge. In a cultural climate where conformity is often rewarded and dissent marginalized, Monarch Literary provides an essential platform for authors whose voices disrupt complacency, whether through piercing social critique, evocative storytelling, or the intricate explorations of poetic form. The work they publish embody an unwavering dedication to intellectual freedom and artistic excellence. Why submit to Monarch Literary? The landscape of contemporary publishing is vast, yet many voices struggle to find publishers aligned with their bold vision and independent spirit. Monarch Literary actively seeks manuscripts that champion free speech and explore challenging ideas. They are particularly interested in literary works that hold high aesthetic standards while engaging deeply with cultural and political issues. Works that refuse to shy away from controversy or complexity. Monarch Literary welcomes submissions of literary fiction and poetry collections. Manuscripts should embody the company's ethos, high quality, challenging, and revolutionary in spirit. To submit your work for consideration, please adhere to the following guidelines. Manuscript type: literary fiction novels, novellas, short story collections, and poetry collections. For fiction, manuscripts should generally be between 50,000 and 100,000 words. Poetry collections should contain a cohesive body of work, typically ranging from 40 to 100 pages. Formatting: submit manuscripts in a readable digital format, preferably PDF or Word document. Use standard fonts, Times New Roman or similar, 12-point size, double space for fiction, and clearly delineated poem titles and line breaks for poetry. Include a brief cover letter outlining your work's themes and why it aligns with Monarch's mission. Attach a short author biography of 100 to 150 words. Only original manuscripts not previously published in full are accepted. Prior partial publications in journals are permitted and should be disclosed. All submissions must be emailed to steve@monarchliterary.com. Whether you're a seasoned author with a well-developed manuscript or an emerging voice eager to break into the literary world, Monarch Literary offers a responsive and principled home for your project. Manuscripts that embody integrity, intellect, and revolutionary spirit are warmly welcome. Closing thoughts: embracing marriage as a revolutionary act in everyday life. As we draw this episode of Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man to a close, let us return to the heart of our exploration: marriage as a revolutionary act. What echoes through our discussion is a call to rethink one of the most intimate and universally encountered social institutions, not merely as a tradition to uphold or a role to perform, but as a deliberate, often radical choice that resonates far beyond the private sphere. Marriage, when embraced with intention and critical awareness, becomes more than a legal contract or cultural ritual. It transforms into a powerful declaration, a personal and political commitment that challenges inherited norms and invites transformation not only within the couple but in society at large. By asserting equality, mutual respect, and shared agency, marriage confronts the historic legacies of patriarchy, economic control, and social conformity. In this light, each union is an act of resistance against forces that seek division, domination, or commodification of human connection. Our journey has revealed that revolutionary marriage springs not from grand proclamations, but the myriad everyday choices that couples make, renegotiating roles, balancing power, nurturing vulnerability, and committing to growth together. It is in these lived experiences, the quiet negotiations over chores, the tough conversations about finances, the mutual support during hardships, and the courageous opening of hearts, that marriage enacts its radical potential. What if the revolutionary act is simply the willingness to build a partnership based on freedom rather than obligation, dialogue rather than decree, and empathy rather than dominance? What if reimagining marriage means crafting an ongoing collaboration that continuously disrupts inherited expectations, rejecting economic inequality, embracing diverse forms of love and commitment? This redefinition invites individuals and couples to see marriage not as a predetermined script, but as a living, evolving project, one that demands conscious effort, reflection, and courage. It asks us to recognize that revolutionary acts often arise not in spectacular upheavals, but in the persistence of daily fidelity to values of equality and autonomy. The personal is political, marriage as a site of societal change. Marriage also serves a microcosm for societal transformation. When two people commit to dismantling oppressive patterns within their relationship, they contribute in a tangible way to a broader cultural shift. Each equitable partnership challenges patriarchal, heteronormative, and economic hierarchies that have historically defined familiar family structures. Likewise, the legalization and social acceptance of diverse marriages, whether interracial, same sex, polyamorous, or otherwise non traditional, signal progressive strides in dismantling systemic exclusion and oppression. These expanded understandings are not mere adaptations, they are acts of cultural revolution, inviting societies to widen the circle of recognition and rights. As such, marriage is both a deeply personal journey and an inherently political one. Every act of choosing love freely, committing to equality, and honoring autonomy reverberates beyond the immediate relationship. It contributes to reshaping norms, expanding freedom, and fostering communities where human dignity and complexity are respected. To you, the listener, I offer this reflection. How might your understanding of marriage or committed partnership shift if you saw it as a revolutionary practice? What small daily acts of resistance and creation are possible within your relationship, whether marital or otherwise? How can love become a conscious, powerful force that not only nurtures but transforms? In these quiet revolutions, hope resides. The potential for social change is not confined to the halls of power or the streets of protest, but breathes to the intimate commitments we forge in our lives. Marriage, in its most profound sense, is an invitation to envision and enact a world where connection, respect, and freedom coalesce. Musings of a cigarette smoking man welcomes your thoughts, your stories, and your challenges as we continue these conversations. Share your reflections by reaching out through our social media channels or emails. Together, we can deepen this dialogue and explore what it truly means to revolutionize love and partnership in contemporary life. Until next time, keep questioning, keep reflecting, and keep building bonds that transform. Thank you for being here with me tonight. I'm a cigarette smoking man. We're gonna win.